Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. This time it's live. As always, it's brought to you by SodaStick.com and Pat Micheletti with me. I'm Brandon Mileski. And Pat, the beauty of a live podcast that we'll do occasionally is this is one where we can interact with listeners and viewers. And if they have comments or questions, they are able to send them to us. And we'd like to do a lot of that. Obviously, it's been a pretty busy week, Pat. I haven't talked to you in a while. I was up north for a couple of days, so I feel like I'm a little distanced from everything that's been going on. But there's so many things I want to talk to you, but I feel like we should start at the beginning of the timeline.
Yeah.
And this seems like forever ago, but I want to talk about the expansion draft because, with the draft and all these trades and, free agency on the horizon, it seems like the expansion draft was so long ago. But I haven't talked to you since the expansion draft happened.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. The Wild end up losing Carson Soucy to the Seattle Kraken. We'll talk about the Seattle side of this in a second. Yeah. But I find it funny with fans of the team and how they view this, and I think sometimes they want like the perfect situation to happen in an expansion draft. Like if we're losing someone who's a significant contributor, they feel like we didn't do enough, or like the only way to get out of this was to lose Victor Rask. And I feel like we need to remind people expansion drafts are no-win situations.
No,
you are going to lose something. You're either going to lose a player or you're going to have to lose prospects. You're going to have to trade something. So if you would have told me 2 months ago, Pat, I like Carson Soucy. I'd rather have him on the team. He's a good player. But if you would have told me 2 months ago, hey, you're going to lose one of your third defense pairing guys, I think we all would have taken that. And I as much as I like him, I don't know if there's a high ceiling with him, and I'm fine with that being the guy you lose.
Well, I like the fact that he went into this expansion draft with a clear vision, knowing that they were going to lose a good player. Okay, and he was okay with that. There was no way to try to get around it. We saw what happened last time, and let me remind you about last time. And we can say, oh boy, in hindsight, how could we have gotten rid of Alex Tuch? Well, Alex Tuch at the time was unproven, was a perimeter player. Did they maybe give up on him a little too early? Yeah, you can rip them for that. But at the time, they had their core guys in place, the Zuckers and the Niederreiters and the Coyles and the Granlunds. That's what they were running with. And those guys were trending upward. Okay. And so they did what they had to do at the time. So now back to this one.
Well, before you move to this one, talking about that last one, Pat.
Yep.
You can say they did it wrong. Ultimately, when they win, people aren't going to complain. And when they lose, they are going to complain.
Yeah.
But Chuck Fletcher at that time, they had built that team to win at that point, right?
Yeah.
You had Suter and Brodin and Spurgeon, and you didn't want to lose Matt Dumba because they thought they could win now. And they had some teams that were competitive and got to the playoffs. But
I would ask this. Okay, let's say they don't make the deal. Who are you dropping from that core?
Yep.
Who are you? I don't know.
Yep.
Oh, Dumba. Really? I don't know. He was younger and he was trending, and I understand you don't want to get rid of at the time probably a 23-year-old defenseman that you drafted number one.
Yeah.
So you just can't look back sometimes, and this time Billy went in and said, I'm going to lose a player. It's unfortunate. We like him, but we're going to lose somebody. And he protected the guys that he really coveted, more so, maybe a little bit more than Carson Soucy. And that's where we're at.
Well, and ultimately he put himself in the best possible position by letting both Parise and Suter go, because that allowed you to protect Dumba and really it was going to come down to Susi or Kaapo Kähkönen.
Yeah.
And I'm a little surprised that Kähkönen did not go. I guess that might be a case of sometimes we view our guys higher than maybe the rest of the league does. But given let's talk about Seattle's version of this, because we have plenty of Minnesota Wild talk to get to, and I would like to. I was surprised by with how many big names were available for Seattle, and they really didn't take any of them, right? I mean, Tarasenko and Landeskog and Carey Price. I would have contemplated Carey Price.
Right.
That's what I thought when Carey Price was available. My thought process was they're going to take Carey Price, and then they're going to take Kähkönen, who's a young goalie who's not making anything. That hopefully in a year or two under Carey Price can develop eventually in the future. I'm not really sure what Seattle is doing at this point, and obviously our expectation was Vegas, and that's probably an unfair expectation for them to reach. But I'm not really sure what they're doing right now.
Well, and the thing is, I thought, I think they took 13 defensemen, 12 or 13.
It took a lot.
Okay. So, and maybe they're not, obviously they're not done. But I thought we would see trades the next day from them. There was a rumor of Giordano going to the Rangers for Strome, and whether that fizzled or wasn't. That was highly reported that was going to happen. Hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But they have an excess of NHL defensemen on their team. No, they didn't take a Tarasenko. They didn't take a Duchesne. They didn't take a Johansson. I mean, there were a lot of players. They didn't take Domi from Columbus, who is young, and it hasn't worked out great there for him. That kind of surprised me a little bit because he's a guy who probably is gonna say to Montreal and say to Columbus, I'm gonna show you. So yeah, it was interesting, and there were names on there that you and I don't know about, that were picked that may be really good players, but we haven't seen them. I don't know. There are, I think, 3 or 4 that I'm like, never heard of them.
Well, I mean, Vegas kind of did that with Carlson and Marchessault were not big time names.
No, we
before they drafted
heard of them.
But not.
Yeah, right.
Not top 6 guys. Right,
and so. It was a little I'd hate to say there are a lot of people the next day that said, oh my God, what are they doing? They're going to be terrible. And because before the draft it was like, oh, look who's available,
look at all the names,
they're going to make the playoffs right away. Who knows, right? Who knows what they'll do? The one trade they did make, and I like the kid, I like the Pitlick kid. I thought he was good for Arizona the past year on a bottom 6. I would love to see him here. He gets dealt to Calgary the following day. So, I think there's more to come out of Seattle.
Now, the one void that leaves for the Wild now is Suter's gone, Susi's gone, Ian Cole is a free agent. Obviously, Brad Hunt is a free agent as well, though I wasn't expecting him to come back. But we've focused a lot on the center position. This team's going to need wings as well, with Breezy gone, and not really sure where Rossi and Boldy are going to fit at this moment because they are young. But they got a void on that blue line, and I think they're going to be pretty active on free agency. But they're also handcuffed in terms of, because of those Breezy Suter contracts, specifically years 2, 3, and 4. You're kind of limited to signing some of these guys to short-term deals.
Yeah. And, it'll be interesting to see what a guy like Alec Martinez gets. All right. He's going to command probably in the $5.5 to $6 million range. Can you get him for 3 years? And, maybe that would work, something like that. But, look at if you do get an Alec Martinez, you're getting a top 4 guy who all he does is swallow pucks. He's great on the power play. He would fill that void.
And the penalty kill. Yeah.
Now, I know they want Ian Cole back, but Ian Cole is going to want to raise, right? And he's making 3.5, 4, somewhere in there. I don't know if he's going to be in your bottom six, your bottom pair, and make that type of money. As much as you like him and want him back, and he's a great guy, and he's great in the locker room and all of that stuff. You build teams with guys like this. I think if he wants to come back, I don't know how much of a raise that they'll be able to give him.
And ultimately, Pat, we've talked about this, and maybe not this year, but at least in year 2, eventually you have to do this in the NHL to begin with, but especially the position the Wild are in, you need guys playing on entry-level deals that are contributing. And specifically on that blue line, you look at Kalen Addison. If they end up, signing Brendan Manel to a contract and bringing him back, I mean, one of those guys probably has to play this year and contribute this year.
Yeah, and that's why
not that you can anoint them a job, but
right. Well, and that's why I kind of tweet. Listen, I think you and I were in the belief that had Marco Rossi gone to camp, I think he was penciled in, at the start of the year last year.
They left it open for him to win a job.
Yeah. Penciled in, left it open. Yeah. It was there for him to take. We don't know. I mean, he looks good. He hasn't played in a year. I get that. I think the door will be open again for him based on what they have, based on what you said of lower contracts, because he'll make $970 or something in that range, right? Rookie contract.
Yep.
And the same holds true for Matt Boldy, in my opinion. I don't think they signed him. Yeah, they want to make sure he's ready, and they've made it clear they want guys ready. And I think if he shows in camp, there's another guy that keeps your cap down and it gives you a little bit more room to spend.
Assuming the Wild don't make a trade, and we'll talk about that in a second, for the center position. I've said it before on this podcast that I would still be in favor, just because you don't know what you're going to get from Rossi. I think it's hard to. You definitely can't put him in with ink. I guess maybe you can put him in with pencil, but you need to give yourself some flexibility there. And I would still be open to signing a guy like Paul Stastny on a short-term deal. I know he's not, not what he used to be, but might be an upgrade from Victor Rask.
Yeah.
And at least for a short term, for at least 1 year, can give you a little bit more, yet doesn't shut the door from Marco Rossi breaking the door down when he's ready to play.
Yeah. Here's the deal on Stastny. Okay. People are going to look at him and they're going to look at his skating and they're going to say, oh my God, the guy, cause he's never been, he never had the Jets. Okay. But what he is, and this is how you got to look at him, is that he is really, really good on the power play. And if that's what you get out of him, and then to, have him be a, whatever line center, and put him with some guys, he can distribute the puck. He's a really smart player. And like I said, he's great on the power play. So, if they do sign him, you can have higher expectations than what the guy really is.
And also, I think you want to have smart players with Kaprizov, because he's a guy who thinks the game at a different level, and it's nice to have guys who can think at least somewhat close to him. Let's just break right into the Eichel stuff. No Jack Eichel trade yet. No. Given we are now, after the draft as opposed to before the draft, Pat, I was always kind of like, well, I'm interested depending on what pieces you have to give up.
Yeah.
I would be fine with giving up your 2 first-round draft picks that they just had, just because I didn't think it was a great draft, and especially because the Wild are in the 20s. I was never super interested in giving up Rossi, or I'd probably give up Boldy before Rossi just based on the center position. But I really don't want to give up guys, given our contract situation, that are going to be able to play for cheap for the next couple of years. But Kurt Wright asks, what pieces do you guys think need to be involved in an Eichel trade, and is it worth it in the long run?
Well, I've talked to a few people kind of about the situation a little bit, and I get the feeling and hearing that if Buffalo doesn't come down from their ask, which is an awful lot, I don't think any team's going to be able to do it, that or wants to do it or will do it. That being said, that does not preclude a 3-team deal. And that makes more sense than anything that I've heard. Okay. Where you kind of share in what Buffalo gets, and, there's different pieces moving around. So, I listened to the comments of Kevin Adams today, and it was general manager speak. If he comes back, he's still a part of the team, blah, blah, blah. But the blood there is, it's not good. It's not good. And it's playing a little game of chicken now, I think. Who's gonna bite. And for me, if they were to get involved in that deal, I'm not. If it's just Minnesota and Buffalo, not for me. Not for me. You have to give up way too much of what currently is being asked.
Well, like I said, now you don't have those first round picks.
No,
because you have no idea whether Buffalo would even like those two players.
Nope.
So now you have to give up salary. So you're going to have to give up at least a Kevin Fiala minimum, maybe Fiala and Greenway or something like that. And then you're going to have to give up prospects like a Boldy and Rossi. And for me, that's where you kind of draw the line, where would I like the potential reward that a Jack Eichel can bring? Yes. But if it eliminates everything else to be able to build around it, I'm not ready just to go with the 2-man show of Eichel and Kaprizov.
Well, you know what you're doing to a certain extent? You're turning into a Buffalo. And what I mean by that is that
sounds scary.
Well, I know. Think about it though. If you lost Boldy, if you lost Fiala, if you lost Rossi, if you lost Greenway, okay, let's say that was the package, and you get back, you've got nobody. You've got Young.
Yep.
And you are in a complete rebuild with a guy who makes $10 million.
Yep.
What's different than Buffalo? What's different? And so no, I don't think. Listen, I think this management is too smart, and they understand, what would be at stake, because Minnesota really thinks, and they believe that they're close, that they've got the right culture, that they've got the right, they've got the right attitude, they got the right system. They know they have holes to fill. Obviously, you don't win the cup, you have holes. You have holes, and so I think. I think that's the path that they will take.
They think they're close, but that doesn't mean they're going to go all in. And I think that's
right.
I think we need to understand here is we said plenty before this past year that I kind of thought it was a transition year to getting yourself up, and I think maybe and it's hard to know given the division they were in and playing the same teams over and over again how truly good they were, but I think maybe they had a better season than most of us thought. And just because you had a better season doesn't mean you should necessarily expedite your plan, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, it doesn't mean you go out and get a guy that's going to shut out a guy like Marco Rossi 2-3 years from now, just to try to win this season. And I still think you saw with the draft last night and continuing today that this is a team with Judd Brackett that I think they're very confident in their ability to make draft picks now. And with last year and this year, and I think they already had a pretty good prospect pool to begin with.
Yep.
And Kaprizov's now advanced past that, but they had some, they got some assets there with Addison and Boldy and Rossi, and I think they look at it and go, we love our draft currency, and we've got a guy that we think can make picks, and we're going to keep letting him make picks over the next couple of years, and we're not going to give that up to try to win this year.
Yeah, and we had discussed last week. They may take a step back before they take another step up. And that's okay if they like the players that they have. Okay. And we're talking, just the guys you mentioned, the Boldies, the Rossies, guys like that they drafted, that they're putting into their system, that are going to need time to acclimate and grow and learn the NHL, but are really, really good players. So, there's a lot there, so yeah, I guess we're gonna have to see, what he fills the rest of the roster with.
You alluded to this earlier today on Twitter, Pat. Andrew Raboyne says, hopefully Eichel gets traded to the Rangers, leaving Zibanejad open to being traded to the Wild. I know your brother works for the New York Rangers, so maybe you got some inside information into that organization. But I love me some Zibanejad, so if there's a way to pull this off, I'm all in on that.
Well, nothing from my brother. I can tell you that. He's always a trap door, right? But no, I did hear something, and it didn't involve necessarily Minnesota. But what I alluded to earlier was the fact that if because the Rangers were in on Eichel too, right? And they've been mentioned with other teams. And a person I know and trust told me that it may take three teams to get a deal done. And whether that goes anywhere, whether it's true or not, we'll just have to wait and see.
All right, go to sodasick.com to get your original Minnesota sports inspired goods. If you haven't seen their stuff yet, you got to check it out. One of my favorite designs. I'm wearing it right now. That's the USA versus Russia, the 4-3 Miracle on Ice T-shirt. All of their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You will love it, and we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is sodastick.com. Original Minnesota sports inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off your next order. Bunch of trades over the last couple of days. Pat, off the top of your head, which one kind of blows your mind the most?
Well, how could it not, right? Vancouver and Arizona.
Yeah.
Big time salary dump. But, I kind of get what Arizona's trying to do. The contracts that they got are all going to be expiring, right? Louis Eriksson, Beagle, and they didn't have a first round pick. It was
Antoine Roussel, yuck.
So they need to accumulate picks, and I wouldn't say that they are starting over, but it sure looks like
that's a start over.
It's a start over. It certainly appears. Connor Garland.
Well, that's the other part. No one's talking about that part of the deal.
I mean, he's a guy. And he is a player. He's a really good player. And I think, I'm not a big Ekman Larson guy. I think he was good early in his career. Last couple of years, he's been, when I watch Arizona, all I see is Chikrin, right?
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, he was okay. But, he's making $7.5-8 million. And so they wanted to dump that contract. And, their finances are kind of in shambles there. And so, I guess you can say it kind of makes sense for Arizona. The hot rumor out there is that Kemper could be on his way out also to Colorado. That's been rumored. Phil Kessel is also apparently willing to move.
Sure.
It certainly looks like Arizona is going to go. I mean, they took the Ladd contract, right, from the Islanders, and they took that contract basically so they can hit the floor of the salary cap, which is what, 60 some million, something like that. So yeah, I'm glad they're back in our division.
Yeah, they are in complete rebuild mode, and is there a more suffering fan base than that? Because every couple of years it seems like they do the same old thing. They take the worst contracts on in the league, and that's why I made a comment on Twitter about how lopsided this trade was, and I was surprised to see the amount of people that were actually defending the opposing side of this. So maybe I'm in the minority here, but I'm with you that
because you want to win, because you want good, you want to look like you're improving your team. That trade did not improve their team.
Well, and from the Arizona standpoint, like people are doing the old, well, it's great to unload that contract in Oliver and Ekman Larson. Arizona's at the floor every year. Like that contract ain't holding them back from competing.
Let's not forget, whose contract they had under, I don't know if they're gone or they had Chris Pronger's contract.
Yes.
They had Marian Hosa's contract. They still might, paying off of. So I'm with you.
So like that contract isn't holding them back. And I'm with you. I've always thought Oliver Ekman-Larsson's a little overrated.
Mhm.
He's still a solid defenseman.
Sure.
Arizona is taking back a percentage of the salary. So the cap hit that was $8 million plus in Arizona is going to be a little over $7 million in Vancouver. I think that's more manageable for them.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Connor Garland's the piece of this where he's 25 years old, led their team in scoring last year. So they gave up arguably a top pairing defenseman, a guy who's a top 6 forward, who was a leading scorer in Arizona. And really all they got was salary in return and a number 9 overall pick, which is great. It's great to have the number 9 overall pick. That's not a guarantee to hit. That's not a guarantee. And especially in this draft, I think this is a pretty poor draft compared to previous drafts. So I just, it doesn't surprise me when Arizona's doing it because they do this every 2-3 years. But I strongly like Vancouver's side here.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this deal. The Ristolainen from Buffalo to Philly. I mean,
how about that?
I don't get it. I mean, he's
is there a worse job in the NHL than being Chuck Fletcher's director of amateur scouting? And you do 365 days of work to be able to make that draft pick, and he's like, oh, there we go. Let's give away that first rounder.
Like I say, Ristolainen's fine. He's fine. He's a good player. Not a great player, but to give up a number 1 and a number 2, that made no sense to me.
All right, Ma5257 says it seems like Ian Cole has some leverage now. Do you think we can get him back? Seems like a must. I don't think the lack of defenseman here gives him a ton of leverage. I think the Wild are gonna Ian Cole's a nice defenseman. I love him on my third pairing.
He's an 11-year vet. Let's not forget that too.
He's great to have in the locker room. Believe me, I like him as a player, but let's not act like he's a game changer and we're desperate to keep him.
And you know what? He made Carson Soucy better. Together they were a calm. You weren't afraid to put them on the ice together compared to other the bottom pair defense that we've had. Of course they'd love to have him back. I'd love to have him back, but I'm not going to overpay for him either. You're just not gonna. And if the price is $4.5 million, I think that's a little too steep for me, especially with what Minnesota has to spend.
Well, and term means a lot, right? Because the Wild are, going to have $13 million worth of cap hits from Parise and Suter just next year. A year removed, in year 2 from this. And Ian Cole, as solid as he is still a little up there in age a little bit, and you never know when a guy who plays as rough and rugged as he does breaks down. So, I might be more willing to entertain that 4.5 you're talking about if it's a 1-year deal. But if he wants 2-3 years, then that changes things. Speaking of, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Adam Randish wants to know, which defenseman would you like to be signed by the Wild in free agency? Just from judging from Russo stuff, it seems inevitable that Alex Goligoski is going to be a member of the Wild.
And I think he'd come on a friendly contract. He's another one now in his 30s. You know what? He can still really move. He's a good player. I would have no problem. And he's a really good guy too. Well, he's the Iron Ranger, right? From Grand Rapids. And I would be just fine with him. If he were to take a spot where Ian Cole was, I'd have no problem with that at all. And he can play the power play, which is good, and log a lot of minutes because, he's one of those guys where he skates so well that, he'd be, to me, he'd be just fine.
And Bill Guerin's made it pretty clear he wants to add some buff to the not big buff, not Buffalo, but just some bigger size guys back on the blue line. When you have guys like Spurgeon and Brodin, and even Dumba's not the biggest guy in the world. That being said, maybe people watching this right now or listening later on would laugh this off just because he's another smallish, skilled defenseman. But there's rumors about Nate Schmidt on the outs in Vancouver that he's available. And all of a sudden we're in need for some lefties here with with Suter and Soucy both gone.
Yep, and he makes $5.5 million, and I think he has 2 years left on his deal, 2 or 3, which again is manageable. But listen, if they got Nate Schmidt, I'd be thrilled. I love the kid. He's wonderful. He'd be great with his teammates, and he competes. Now, what type of D is he? He's played some power play. I just think he's a defenseman.
Yep.
Not necessarily offensive, not necessarily defensive. Moves the puck well. I think they'd have to get him in a trade, and so does Vancouver want to send him here? I don't know. I'm sure that they've gotten offers now. It appears that Nate and Vancouver have come pretty much to a gentleman's agreement that it's not working out here. We'll do our best to move you. So, he'd certainly be one. We talked about Alec Martinez. That's the guy I would like them to get if it's possible.
Yes.
I think he would fill everything that you're looking for.
Luke Burton wants to know, do you like a Nick Foligno pickup at the right price?
Do you?
Well, here's the part, Pat. Let's say his last name wasn't Foligno.
Yeah.
Let's say his last name was
Mileski.
Nick Mileski. Well, then I would definitely sign him.
True.
Let's say his name was Nick Mileski.
Yep.
I think a lot of the fan base's fascination with this is, well, we love Marcus. He's a fan favorite. You bring in Nick, he's going to be similar personality. It's the great storyline of two brothers playing together. He's dropped off a bit the last 2 years, Pat, and let's face it, he's had a good career. I think he could fit a role here. It's not like you're bringing him in hoping he's going to be on your first line. And you got to find a wing somewhere. Is it possible playing with his brother reinvigorates him? And he's been a captain in Columbus and has some leadership qualities at the right price. I guess you got to tell me what the right price is. Sure. At the right price, I'm interested, but I also think we're getting obsessed over him based off his last name.
We are. And what did we hear? Oh my, Nick Foligno got traded to Toronto. They are a shoo-in to win the cup. He got hurt. He didn't play a lot, in and out. I'm not blaming Nick Foligno for Toronto not winning, but he was supposed to be that guy that was going to get him over the hump in whatever role that they had him, in. Another one, you know what? You would be able to trust him because he works hard. He's smart. He's a good hockey player. Is he going to wow you? No. Are you safe? Is he a safe signing? For sure. I would go back to him. Put it that way. That makes sense.
Brock Anderson says, what is the knock on Manel? He produced in the AHL and KHL, yet it seems like they want very little to do with him. Given our D shortage, it seems like he's an ideal option.
Here's the problem that I see. Bill Guerin told us, you know what, I'm going to try to get us a little bit bigger on the back end. Okay. You've got Dumba, you've got Brodin, and you have Spurgeon. Okay. Now you potentially have Addison. Okay.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you have Manel. That's 5.
Yep.
You look in the playoffs and listen, I think Brennan Manel is an NHL player. I do. I think he's getting ready. But it's all about, does the guy fit on your team? Is that what you want? Now they can go with him and he'd be fine. He'd be just fine. But man, when it comes to the playoffs and you're playing every other night and you're getting hammered, I don't know if they're going to, I just don't see them going that route, necessarily to, unless they're thinking, okay, he can be our number 5. We'll bring in 2 other guys with a little bit more grit and a little bit bigger, and have Addison play a little bit longer in the American League, then he can be our seventh and, use him when we need him. But I can't see all the guys that I'd listed, together as a group.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is Manel has similar guys already on the team that play his style of hockey yet are better than him. Jared Spurgeon. I when I first saw him in training camp years ago, I said he reminds me of a mini Jared Spurgeon.
I recall.
He plays a similar style, but just Jared Spurgeon's on a whole nother level mentally. So he's always been kind of blocked off from the guys in front of him. So I think why there's a divide here is Brendan Manel made a personal decision, what he thought was best for his career, and said, I need to go to the KHL because I don't have the appropriate avenue to get to the NHL with this current stock of defensemen in front of me. So he goes to the KHL, and I think that made the Wild mad because from a team standpoint, that Manel was not doing what was best for the team. He was doing what was best for himself.
Yep.
And so now I'm sure there's contract dispute because Manel thinks he's an NHL player, and the Wild probably would still like to have him, but might be a little bit hurt from his decision. I still think there might be maybe some sign and trade here going on, Pat, where we got to find a suitor, and we'll sign you if we can send you to this place to play. Because to your point, you still got Addison. You would think would be waiting in the wings, and how many smallish right-handed defensemen can you have on a roster? You can only have so many.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the other NHL trades. How about the Seth Jones trade to Chicago? They gave up. Chicago's playing as if they think they are going to be a Stanley Cup contender this year. That's the kind of move they made with Seth Jones, and man, they gave up a lot for him, and not only in terms of assets, but financially as well.
They did. And the kid that they gave up, and I wish I knew analytics better, Brandon. I will admit I do not. When they're put up there, I listen, I try to figure it out. But from reading what I read, when I first saw it, I'm a big Seth Jones guy. No, he wasn't great last year, but 2 years ago, he might have been
unbelievable.
Unbelievable. But projected out, and I don't know, the lingo. Projected out, they say the kid who was a number one pick for them, Boquist, is that how you pronounce it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, who went in the deal, is projected in the same time frame in 3 to 4 years to be a bigger point producer than Seth Jones, and they're paying Seth Jones $9 million, and this kid's on a rookie contract. Maybe they feel he's not ready yet, and they want to get there sooner than later. They did trade for his brother, who was in Edmonton, so now you have two Joneses. Caleb Jones, I believe his name is, who is part of the Blackhawks organization. So they're rolling the dice. We'll see.
Well, it's pretty interesting with the dynamics of this division, with Colorado potentially losing Landeskog, and Grubauer is going to be a free agent. And I'm now talking about the Central Division. We're going back to the Central Division.
Okay.
The St. Louis Blues, are going to send Tarasenko somewhere at some point. I would think someone's going to take him on.
And they picked up Buchnevich from the Blues in a trade. Really good player, who's going to help them quite a bit. Go ahead.
Well, there's just kind of a lot of, in terms of how I view the division, I don't really know.
No,
how I look at it. I would still think Colorado's going to be up there just because you got Makar and McKinnon, but they're going to lose some guys just because they just paid Makar $90 million over the next 6 years. They got to save money for McKinnon. They're up against cap problem. When you have those big stars, you can't keep all of your players. So maybe they missed out on their window. There's a chance here in the next couple of years for the Wild to take advantage.
Well, I agree 100%. And look at Nashville. People are like, "Wow, boy, they exposed Duchesne, Ryan Johansson. They both make over $8 million." Okay, and David Poile was thinking, please take one of them. Seattle did not. They took Jarnkrok. right? And
Yep.
and so Nashville is now stuck with those two guys. And will they try to move a Duchesne? Now, someone asked me this question: would you take a Matt Duchesne in a trade if Nashville retained half the salary?
Oh, if you're paying him $4 million?
Yes. You know what? And I thought, you know what?
Yeah, I definitely don't want him at 8. I can tell you that. I don't want him at 6.
I loved Matt Duchesne when he was in Colorado.
Yes.
I thought he was dynamic and really good. And oh my gosh, I wish we had one of those. Then he gets to Nashville, and he's literally done nothing for him.
What's his age now? How old is he?
God, he's got to be 25, 26 now.
Is that it? Is he that young?
Yeah, somewhere in that.
If he's that young, yeah, I would do it for half a salary.
Maybe 27 tops.
But no chance Nashville's going to give you half the salary to a team in their own division.
Well, no, it all depends what they want to do. I mean,
yeah,
it'll be pretty interesting.
2 things before we go. One, my favorite tweet, and I forget who tweeted this, but there's rumors of the Islanders taking both Parise and Suter in free agency. How fun would that be?
It would be interesting.
They like their Americans over there in New York, don't they?
Yeah. I would if I'm a guessing guy, I'm guessing there's a stronger chance Zach. I know that Suter has some suitors, more than a lot of people know. Upwards of probably 10 to 12 teams, right? And in fact, at one point there were more, but you can eliminate those teams because he's not going to get paid what he got paid, but he's going to get more than the minimum. Okay. And, automatically you eliminate teams because there's no way they can do it because of the cap. But there are some teams, and apparently we'll find out Monday, Brandon, but apparently a decision is supposed to come on him on Monday that he's going to make up his mind.
Last topic, the NHL draft for the Minnesota Wild. Whenever a draft is done, you always hear the GM or the director of amateur scouting do the old, we didn't expect this player to be here. And in this case, I do believe it. In the goaltender they got, Jesper Wallstedt. He was, there were 2 goalies that were never ever supposed to drop to 20, and Casa went a lot higher. But I do believe they didn't expect Wallstedt to be there, and people are doing the old, well, it's a great fit because they're getting pretty stocked at forward and defenseman, but they're lacking a goalie. I'm still always a believer, regardless of where you have weaknesses and strengths, they just take the best player available, because if you get overstocked at forward, you can make trades, to supply somewhere else. We saw that with the Kalen Addison trade.
Yeah.
But in this case, I do think it's a situation where your biggest need from a prospect standpoint intersects with best player available in Wallstedt. And obviously you don't trade up for it unless you believe that.
No. And you can leave him there one more year in Sweden. And then that gives Talbot one more year on his contract after this coming year. That year, the kid can play in Iowa, and Kakkonen will have 3 years under his belt. It kind of seems how it might work itself out. I love their 2nd round pick.
Of course, because he's from the Iron Range.
He's from the Iron Range. But
yeah, of course you do.
And quite frankly, I have not seen him play very much, maybe once or twice. But I talked to an agent today. I talked to Brett Larson, who is going to be coaching him next year. And they rave about him, how good a player he is. And, of course, any of these guys, Brandon, are going to be 2 or 3 years away. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But you know what? It'll be fun to watch him develop. And it was a really good pick.
Well, my scouting strategy with a lot of these players, Pat, is I just watch YouTube highlights, which is really which is really a bad way to do it because you can't really get a full 100% focus on a player based off of just YouTube highlights. I get the sense watching him that he doesn't have a lot of physical attributes that's just going to make you go, wow. I mean, that, he's not the best skater. He doesn't have the best shot. He's not physically imposing. He's a little bit on the, he's 5'11", which I don't think is short, but it's not big for an NHL defenseman, and he's not fast for someone who's that size. But he just seems like he has a high hockey IQ, which is the thing I value the most in hockey players.
Oh my gosh.
The ability, especially back at the blue line, to be able to make right decisions, make the right pass.
Yep.
He kind of has the ability to look off and make it go this way and pass it that way. Seems like he can obviously won Mr. Hockey. He just seems like a very smart player, and maybe the physical stuff with him is going to take a little bit longer to develop, and he might be one of those 3 years in college kind of players. Mm-hmm. But if you're smart, I think eventually you can get there.
Yep, I agree.
All right, that's it. We appreciate everyone for chiming in the comment section. Sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I really appreciate everyone watching our live version of Beyond the Pod tonight. Pat, you will be back with me. The Tenna Fitzgerald is going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yes. You and Jesse Pierce are going to be with me in the noon hour in studio on Wednesday, because that is the day NHL free agency kicks off. So we'll be an hour into free agency. We'll be breaking down basically everything going on in free agency on the Fan, noon to 1. And then I will be back with you probably on Thursday for another taped episode of Beyond the Pod.
And just for the record, Jesse DM'd me and said, why aren't we going 2 hours? I said, hey, it's not my show. We were asked to come on, and that's the way. So
well, here's the deal. The 1 o'clock hour is open. If you guys perform well, maybe we'll keep you along. It's performance-based business.
I couldn't agree more. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. He's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. Thank you so much for listening to and watching, I should say, another episode of Beyond the Pod. As always, it's brought to you by sodastick.com. Use the code KFAN for 15% off. We will talk to you next time on Beyond the Pod. Bye.